wants to be. Because if they don't want to be in our game, I can't make any money. So, if you didn't know, climate change is real. And anybody who's telling you otherwise is a liar. Climate change is real because your players are always ready to leave your game. The minute they run into a situation where they say, like, oh, this costs too much, or I went on vacation and I didn't play for a couple of days, they come back, I don't need to play this. So players are always on the brink of leaving your game. And feature is not fast enough to save your game, okay? No matter how much you think the next PvP mechanic is gonna be awesome and it's gonna do all this great stuff, or, hey, we got this guild thing and it's gonna be really cool. What is it, 3 months away, 6 months away, 8 months if you're really having a bad day? It cannot save your game. Live operations is your main resource. Without live operations, without a serious live operations team, experienced game designers, experienced producer, experienced PM, you are missing out on a future for your game. You're missing out on the money. You're missing out on not laying off all your people. And just so we're clear, double XP is not content, okay? You can't turn on double XP weekend and be like, hey, check out all this content we've got. It doesn't actually work like that. So the question you need to ask yourself is, who is leading your live game design? Do you have an experienced leader, somebody who understands how to make games, who knows what the player wants? Do you have that person leading your live game design? But Daniel, it's all live game design, right? No, split your leads. If you have feature and you have live, you need 2 different leads, okay? Here's a perfect example. On our project, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, it's a very, very big project. We have under 100 people, but we're closing in on that number. I was asked to take over as the full lead designer, both in feature and live operations. At this time, for about a year, I had been running live operations. I have about 7 game designers who report to me. So I said, yeah, cool, I'll totally take over feature. That was a mistake. Feature is so big, and in most companies, it's very political. And what I mean by that is, feature design, it turned out that as the lead designer, I was actually the lowest decision maker in this totem of decision makers, right? So you have the lead designer, you have a producer, you have an executive producer, you have a game director, you have a general manager, and then if you work in a company that has a corporate structure, you have all of these corporate people. And they may not be necessarily interfering, but they still want you to make money. They still have a desire for certain things, so they're gonna exert a certain amount of influence to say, hey, you should do this. So what happened was, I was spending all of my time in meetings, figuring out designs, figuring out what we're gonna do, talking to all of these individuals who were stakeholders. And it meant that I wasn't paying enough attention to live operations. And during that window of time, we saw several escaped defects go into the wild. So that means I had content that wasn't where it should have been. We had bugs that should not have gone out the door. And it made me look bad. So I went to my game director and I said, you know, I think we really need to split this role. There needs to be somebody who can be a dedicated feature designer and somebody who can be a dedicated lead designer on live. And that's where I am, and that's what I do. So, but that means it's not a rivalry, okay? Your feature and your live need to be best friends. These are people that there cannot be animosity between these 2 individuals. Because what happens is feature's building something that I'm going to be supporting in 3, 6, 8, 12 months. And if they're building something that I can't use or that my team cannot use, that's wasted money. So feature is always building what you need next quarter. And live is already operating in this quarter on the things that feature gave us on the last quarter. So your feature should be tools for live operations to exploit. If they're not doing that, something's wrong, your team's not working well together, you really need to sit down and analyze like what's happening between feature and live. And like I said, dead features are wasted opportunities. So if a feature comes across the board and it goes into live operation, that's wasted money for every installed user you paid. That's wasted money for all of those people who worked on that project to get it out the door. And it's going to be dead in 3 months when live can't support it. And live's going to go back to using the old tools that they were using before that feature came out. So I know I got 4 people up here, and I say Trinity, but this is a really cool picture. So the Live Ops unholy trinity. What is the unholy trinity of live operations? It's your product manager, it's your producer, and it's your lead game designer. Now, there are other people who support this leadership group, right? You have your head of analytics. You have your, in EA, we call him the DD, the development director, people who do the scheduling and kind of map out where you're going. But really, in our studio, these 3 people, the product manager, he's our money guy, he's our economy guy, the producer, and the designer really drive we're the tip of the spear. What are we doing? How's it going to be built? What is it that our players want? The three of us are constantly partnered up with analytics. We're constantly partnered up with our DD, and we're figuring out where are we going, what are we doing. So these people, like I said, are your live operations team. And if they have any sort of adversarial relationship, it's not only going to hurt the game, it's going to hurt the team. How many times, if you guys have worked on a team like this, how many times have you had a PM try to override game design and say, like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. We need to get this much money out of them. We need to get it out of them right now. How many times have you had a producer who thought he was a designer and was actually really terrible at it? And how many times have you had a designer who was just a jackass and didn't know what he was doing and created conflict? When these three people are in conflict, that means that you're not paying attention to your player. That means the content that you're delivering to your player is subpar. And fundamentally, it means that you have now created strife on your live operations team. So now your good people who are really awesome are going to get poached by probably like wargaming. And so you don't want to lose your good people. So if these people aren't working together well, you don't have a united front. So live operations leadership has to be a united front for the sake of the people that work under you, and for the sake of the players, and for the sake of your bottom line. Our best days have come from that collaboration, where my PM, my producer, and I have sat down and we said, dude, you know what'd be super rad? We're working on freaking Star Wars. Emperor Palpatine should shock Jedi. It should like blow up Jedi. And then my PM goes like, dude, that's so cool because we could do this with the monetization. We could build it like this, and we can have people get it at this speed and do these things to get that. My producer's like, we can totally do that. We have the resources. These are the things that have made our game exceptional. And now there's something to kind of think about with our game. We are the #1 Star Wars mobile game in the world. And not by like a small margin. We have dwarfed every Star Wars mobile game combined by an enormous factor, okay? So we're clearly doing something right. And we're not putting out features at a rate of like every month. They're coming out every 6 months-ish. So maybe twice a year we're doing big features. So we're clearly doing something right here in that collaboration, and also it's Star Wars. How do you screw that up? So what does live design look like? Right, analytics. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Analytics is the science of our game. We have a fantastic head analyst, Mike Wong, who just has a fantastic team working under him. And the relationship that design has with him is that any of my designers can sit and chat with him. He's very amiable. He loves to work with our designers. This is a guy who's like, hey, I saw some data. You should take a look at it. Now, we've trained all of our designers to not just wait for analytics to come to them, but that they actually go to analytics and engage with them and figure out what are they doing next, what do we have to do. We also have a dedicated design team who all they do is build content. So like I said, I have 7 designers who report to me. My job is kind of the editor. I try not to interfere with my guys because they're smarter than me. I hired a very good events designer. I hired a very fantastic character designer. We've got a really, really great team, so why would I mess with them? My job is to make sure that they're on point, right? That it meets all of our obligations to everybody that we have inside the corporation, everybody who is a stakeholder external of the corporation, right? And then our players, fundamentally our players. So I make sure that, hey, if their design is off track, I'm like, okay, well, where's it off track? How can we get you back on track? What are we doing here? What's the objective here? I'm making sure that everybody's synced up with all of these other leads. So analytics is getting put in there. And then I play through everything to make sure the balance is correct. I usually handle most of the balance work myself to make sure that it's where it needs to be for our player. We are constantly refining our content with PM and analytics. PM works with us constantly to make sure that we're not giving away the farm because we're game designers. We want everybody to have it for free. I want you to play a great game. I don't care about money. Who needs a job? Not me. And then analytics, right? Like, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is right. Like, there's nothing worse than building something where you're like, I know what I'm doing. I've been making games for 13 years. And then the players are like, you're an idiot. I hate you, and I'm leaving your game. So it's a constant refinement. We start with the design. We run it by all of these people. We get their buy-in. They help us point out things that we were blind to or that we thought we missed. We then build it. We deploy it to the team to let them play. We have a little beta structure that we can deploy to some very select players. And then we get feedback, and we again work with PM and analytics. Hey, are we on point here? Is this what we need to do? Do we need to change this? And everything in our game is about growing committed players. It doesn't matter if I have 1 million DAU and they're all gone next week. My committed players are the people who keep me in business. This is why I have a job. It's why I get paid. If these guys disappear, I have failed, and I do not deserve my job. So, the creative in the business, it's about a checks and balance system. It's not an adversarial relationship. That doesn't mean there's not conflict. We have conflict all the time. There are many times where I walked out of a meeting, I'm like, my PM's an idiot, and my producer's an idiot too, and I'm an idiot. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the healthy process to getting to a better game. But we always go back. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to my PM or my producer. I'm like, Nick, I messed up. I'm sorry. I lost my temper. I shouldn't have done that, but you were right on this thing. I totally don't agree about this thing. But we have always been a checks and balances to one another. There have been many times where they've come to me and they said, like, Daniel, I think you're too blind. I think you're too in love with this thing right now, and you're not seeing the need of our player. So, why aren't others succeeding? Why are so many people failing at this? Number one, there are too many cooks in your kitchen. If you cannot have somebody who has a point of authority to say, stop, you're off track, we need to do it, we need to move this way, then you have too many cooks in your kitchen. I can't tell you how many times I've watched numerous stakeholders walk into a room and massacre a feature that would have made them $1 million. So get rid of your cooks. Promoting the wrong individuals is your lead. If you have a fantastic engineer and that guy's doing the work of 3 people, you probably don't want to promote that guy to the lead. Why not, you say? Because he's probably not a people person. He's probably not a leader. So now you've taken your best guy who's doing the work of 3 people and you've put him in a lead position. He is now no longer supporting the team. Maybe in a worst case scenario, he's the kind of individual that nobody wants to work under, that nobody wants as a boss. So now you've created strife inside your engineering team. Now you've lost even more productivity. Now you're going to come to a situation where you either have to fire this guy or this guy leaves because he's so stressed out and doesn't want to be there. So now you've lost one of your most valuable resources. He has exited the company and gone to your competitor. And if you're really unlucky, before he left, 3 or 4 guys on your engineering team left as well. So it is far better to promote an average programmer who has wonderful people skills, who wants to manage people, who knows how to manage people, than to take your best guy and put him in a leadership position. PM or analytics-driven environment. What this means is, well, a little bit what we talked about earlier, right? A PM who's just like, I don't care what design thinks, we're going to do it this way. If there's no balance, and we see this all the time, how many games have you downloaded from the App Store where the concept was super dope, and you were like, I actually really want to play this game, and then you get in, and you're like, great, I didn't even enter my credit card, and they've already charged me 4 times. So you don't, like, I can't tell you how many times we've left short-term money on the table for longer-term money down the road. Because, again, it goes back to that committed players. If I don't have committed players, I have 0 revenue, and I don't have a job. Sunk cost bias. This, by far, is the hardest thing to overcome. And the reason is because it's sunk cost bias, right? You go like, man, I've already spent $1 million. We're 6 months into this. It sucks, but I got to get it out the door in 3 months. I don't really have a solution to overcome this. This seems to just be the insidious thing that sits in everyone, right? It requires a certain amount of bravery and self-awareness to say, I'm in too deep, and this isn't going to work. I'll give you an example. There was a time on a project where we were running down the clock to our release date. We had a major feature that we had dumped 6 months into, and everybody knew it was terrible. It was terrible. It's not a game I'm working on right now. It's a game in the past, so Star Wars is awesome. We're all awesome. We don't make mistakes. So we got into this place where we all sat down in the room and we were like, this thing is terrible. Nobody agrees on it. We know it's going to be a failure. Nobody said that out loud, but we all knew it was going to be a failure. And they decided to push it ahead anyway. And it wound up costing the game. It wound up costing 30 people their job. The game ran for a period of time and then was shut down. So it wound up costing 100 people their job ultimately. Sunk cost bias is the thing that kills so many games and so many projects. And I don't blame you. How many times are you committed to an Apple featuring that you know you have to get, or a Google featuring that you have to get, or an external obligation to your license holder that you have to deliver X by this day? How do you get out of that? That takes a lot of bravery, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to stop and say, you know what, maybe we can't deliver 100% on this thing, but maybe there's a better way that we can get this out the door and still meet some of these obligations. So I wish I had a clear answer to solve sunk cost bias, but it is one of the ultimate killers. And then the worst part, everybody's a designer, except when they're not. And what I mean by this, and there's probably people in this room who will disagree with this part. I know Supercell has this mentality like people can be designers. The problem is anybody see the movie Ratatouille? It's a Pixar movie about a rat who makes food and loves food. So if you haven't seen it, it's a Pixar movie about a rat who makes food. There's a great line in that movie where the critic, who's been kind of the antagonist this whole movie, kind of comes to this realization at the end. And he says, he hates this chef, Gustav. And Gustav says, anyone can cook. And the critic says at the end, he says, I used to hate the line, anyone can cook, because I don't think anyone can cook. But what I realize now is Gustav didn't mean that anybody could be a great chef, but that a great chef could come from anyone. And that's much in the same way as design. Most of you will never be designers, and that's okay. But a good design can come from you. The question goes all the way back to one of my first slides, which is, do you have the right person in the leadership role of the live game design lead? Because if you do, that person isn't a tyrant and isn't blocking everybody, pushing everybody back. That person is saying like, oh man, that's a really good idea. I'll totally take that back and maybe we can do something with this. That's what a good design lead does. If you don't have that, you now have too many cooks in your kitchen, right? Everybody's like, oh, I'm a designer. I've never done design in my life, but how hard could it be, right? I like video games. I once had a VP come to me. I was working on a kid's game, and it was for boys, like 9 to 12, and he comes to me and he says, yeah, Daniel, we got a problem with this game. My 8-year-old daughter, she doesn't really like it. And I was like, okay, that's good. We're on the right. He's like, yeah, no, you're gonna need to change some stuff. And I was just like, you're killing me, man. I can't do this. And ultimately, it created a lot of conflict. That project is closed. So not everybody's a designer, and that's okay. But you need to have a good design person who can help you take these ideas that are coming out of your team. Because if your lead designer is not a collaborative individual, right, and he's keeping a closed design kind of committee and nobody can be a part of it, that guy's a jerk too, and you don't want him. I want everybody in my studio to come to me and give me good ideas. Because here's the thing. I hope everybody that's working on my project loves the game. I hope everybody that's in the studio that I'm in loves Star Wars. Because if they don't, why are they on our project? So, not everybody is a designer, and that's okay. So, some closing thoughts. I'll try to keep this short. These are nothing in order. I just kind of was like, I finished my slides. I have some other things I want to say. So I just kind of threw some things up here. So not a lot of cohesion here, but some points that I still feel are very important to running a live operations game design. Build your roadmap. Okay, know what you're going to do over the next year. It doesn't matter if everything past 30 days changes, but have a roadmap. It will save you so much. We have a roadmap out all the way till next September, maybe December. Here's the thing. There's a lot of things we want to do on the roadmap, and it's a really good place to track the ideas that people have come up with. Oh man, it'd be really cool if we had like a Yoda event where Yoda does all those things. Cool, we can do that in November of next year. Awesome, let's put it on there. We know what we're going to do there. The thing is like everything past 30 days is going to move around. But very rarely does anything drop off of our roadmap, right? And more to the point, it either moves in by a few months or it moves out by a few months or it just gets moved out into the next quarter. So build a roadmap. It will help you know where you're going because the next thing is it's going to help you establish your content pipeline. So we deliver GADs, anywhere between 4 and 10 characters to players a month. So that's a lot of characters, and I have that's the kind of thing in our design department that just eats designers. If I get another designer and I throw them in there, that pipeline will just grow to accommodate that designer, and I'll never get them back. So we have to have a very clear content pipeline. Our character pipeline is working approximately 10 to 12 weeks ahead, right? So they're working on characters that aren't even in this quarter a lot of times. So get your content pipeline going and establish a roadmap. Those are going to be really, really critical for you because here's where you don't want to be in live operations. We only have like a week to go. We can't get it out the door. What are we going to do? We don't know. That place is terrible. Believe me, that's an ulcer and a lot of loss of hair. Like you don't want to be there. Community is part of your live team. Our community manager, Cassandra Gomez, sits with the live team. She sits with the designers. She is an earshot of all the design team. When we talk about stuff, she knows about it. She goes into Jira, she collects all the patch notes. She goes to our producer, talks about what we're gonna do. When we talk about with PM, we're like, oh, we need these packs, and it's gonna do this, and it's gonna go here. Cassandra's in that. So community is part of your live team. If you really, really, really want a healthy live team, you need to know that your players hate you. And how are you going to do that without a community manager? If you do retrospectives, for the love of God, make changes. I have been in retrospectives where we've talked about how we hate the company and we hate everything that we've done. But you know what we do? We do the same things the next time. Why waste everybody's time if you're not going to make changes? Please, 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 do retrospectives. They're fantastic. But please, whatever lessons you've learned out of that retrospective, take those changes and put them back into your cycle. Don't make the same mistakes. That's part of the sunk cost bias as well. So that helps you avoid that stuff. Remember, guys, players want to spend in a fun game. You can get everything in our game right now for free. You don't have to spend a dime. You're going to have to spend a lot of time, but you don't have to spend anything. And the players have continued to sustain us because we have made a genuinely fun game. If you took the Star Wars IP and you stripped it off our game, we would still have a good game. Would we be top 20, top 10, top 5 like we have been? Probably not. I won't lie about that. But we would be making money. We would be profitable. We'd probably be in the top 100. It is a good game in its core. Throwing Star Wars on it made it a great game. Players want to spend in our game because we genuinely care about our players. And my job every day, when I sit down at my desk, when I talk to the designers, when I talk to the producer, when I talk to the PM, the first thing in my mind is this enjoyable? Do I want to quit the game? And I've been here for 2 years. Thank you very much. My name is Daniel. You can find me on the internet. I guess we'll do some questions. Or not.
1 second, please. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing your passion. And now we are ready to proceed to Q&A session. If you have any question, please raise your hands and speak in the microphone.
Hello, thank you for an interesting talk. Now, my question would be, you described this pipeline where you identify player needs and then you proceed to deliver events to them. So if it's possible, can you just go a bit more deep into this process?
Sure.
Like, just maybe an example from your experience, what was that need you identified and how you tackled that issue?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So a lot of what we do, so we have this disparity between what our analytics tell us and what our forums tell us. According to analytics, our game is awesome and everybody loves us. According to the forums, we're idiots and we don't know what we're doing. And so we have this disparity where we will sometimes discover problems in specific aspects of our game. And I don't want to get too specific here because I don't want to I don't want to step over some boundaries here. But we have a feature in our game that people were complaining was way too difficult. And we thought, man, the analytics look good here. Like, they look really, really good. But everybody they hate it. Like, what's going on here? So we took a step back and we said, all right, we think we can make some modifications to this that will allow players to move through this feature a little bit easier and with a little bit less friction. And we did. And it actually damaged our revenue. Now, there were other things that had happened at that time, so it's hard to do a direct correlation. But we do know that when we fixed it and kind of took it back to where it was, our revenue started going back up again. So that entire process, that highlights, even though we reverted, it highlights how we look at things, how we identify a problem. We will take that community feedback, and the first thing we'll go like, is there actually fire here? If there's smoke, there might be fire. We then take it to analytics, and we say like, hey, is there an issue here? Depending on how much feedback we're getting from the forums may determine if we make a gut call to override analytics and say like, yeah, it looks good, but maybe we need to try this out. We're not so dramatic anymore where we'll just go and make a big change and hope it doesn't go poorly. We'll try to do like a small change, deploy it to a small group of internal people to see if it's feeling better and to get feedback that way. The other way is that we'll get something from analytics or PM, where PM will come to us and say, hey, this thing that we put out didn't engage people. This was supposed to be a retention play, or this was supposed to be an engagement play or a revenue play. It didn't meet what it was supposed to do. So with all of our events, we actually bring them back and analyze them after they've run. And then we actually go through them like, well, we saw people fall off here, we saw things, and then when we run the next event, we make that iteration to change that. Did that answer the question? Okay.
So if I understand correctly, what you mean here is that basically your feature design team is shipping features to live product, and then the further development of these features, as well as like temporary events and stuff, handled by live design team, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and part of my job too is to work with feature, right? Because the whole point of having live and feature, like I was saying earlier, being best friends, is that I do sit into some of those feature meetings. The nice thing is that I don't have to sit in all of them. And I don't have to deal with the hierarchy of people who have input on it. I can literally say like, hey, make sure it has this functionality because we're going to need to do this in live, or we need to run these things, or we're going to need to build content around this. So here's what's happening when we do X. You need to make sure you incorporate it here. So. By the way, how dope is that Stormtrooper, huh? I wish I was that cool.
Hey Dan, Timo from Wargaming. I want to ask a brief question about your thought and execution process for verifying the new features or even meta content that you are going to bring out, and how do you validate that it's going to work in the correct way with the player segment that you are aiming into that?
Cool. So one of the things we do is we try to, first off, we try to build from what we see that our community needs, right? Where the game is going. We're very lucky in that the game itself kind of has already set a direction where as long as we build within the framework of that genre, right, that it's a collectible CCG and that the whole point of the game is that you get these characters and you fight them and you fight big stuff, and that's what, people love this because it's like, I can take Darkseid and I can take Darth Nihilus and I can pair him up with Commander Luke and I can kill things, and it's like, that's cool. So we're in that mindset. So we start there and we say, like, does this even fit in the whole toy box idea? Like, if it doesn't, we just kind of put that to the side. What we'll do then is we build prototypes. We prototype on it. Sometimes we'll do paper prototypes and we'll get kind of a sense of, yeah, this is where we're going. Then what we'll do is once it's built, we'll deploy it. We have some internal teams that we can deploy to that can play and give us a lot of feedback. And then we have a gentleman by the name of Ryan Thomas who handles all of our really that committed group of players that I was talking about. So they have access to him. He helps filter out what they need and what they want. So we'll sometimes deploy to them to make sure that we're hitting the mark for those players. And if we're not, then it's back to the drawing board.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
There's one back there. 2. Ooh.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about the size of your external testing team? So when you are ready to ship a feature out, and how do you balance getting player input versus not leaking and still having suspense for the end player?
I'll tell you what, when we figure out how to get rid of leaks, I will let y'all write a paper on that and I'll publish it and I'll probably get rich and famous. But no, leaks happen. We actually develop with the mindset that we know that content's gonna get out. So we do a lot of pre-preparation for that. So we scrape our localization files to make sure that there's certain things that we don't want to get out to the player, that it's not there. We scrape all of the XML to make sure that certain gameplay elements that we don't yet want to reveal. So we have to pull a lot of stuff out, and we expect that everything else that goes out the door to this group of people will probably get leaked. And you just have to be okay with that, I guess. As far as the size, I can't really talk about that. You'll forgive me. It varies based on what we need. We have the ability to kind of get as many as we need in order to make it happen. And we try to keep it as rooted in the player base as absolutely possible so that we're getting legit feedback and not some guy who works four doors down in another EA office and they're like, yeah, that's cool, I guess. So that answer it, sort of?
So do you take their production data and then move it over and run the testing in a new environment, or do you go straight to the players? They're whitelisted players?
So no, it's a separate environment. So there's no cross-contamination at all, because I guarantee you the minute we did that, it's something you get out in the wild. So it is a separate environment.
Thank you. Another question?
Hello. What would you say has been your most successful event, and how would you go about measuring the success?
What is our most successful event? Is that what you asked? And how did we measure that? Darth Nihilus, by far, was our most successful event. Most successful revenue, event. We have had more successful engagement events. So Commander Luke Skywalker, the one that we just released, obviously huge engagement. It's the first time we really told the Star Wars story, and it was the first time that the players got to use old Ben Kenobi and actually lose the fight by getting struck down by Darth Vader. It's actually pretty cool. That was by far the most widely received event, and we gauged that by retention and engagement. So how many people played through it, how many people persisted through it, and how many people got the rewards, got Commander Luke Skywalker kind of at the end, or invested in their character pool to make progress in that event. So that was hugely engaging. Now Darth Nihilus, which if you're not Star Wars people, Darth Nihilus is pretty much the coolest bad guy of all time. So he's rad. He was the most successful just by revenue, and that was easy to measure because it's revenue. And to this day, people still love him. Like it is like, oh, bring back Darth Nihilus. Like that's so cool. I want to play that event again. So we just measure it by analytics, and it's analytics that we kind of preset, right? We look at it and we go like, okay, look, I don't expect everything that we build to generate $1 million. That's unreasonable, and that's going to put an unreasonable pressure on my guys. Like it's not the way we do this. What we look at is we're like, this is really cool. This is Star Wars. We want to do something really cool here. Let's make this one about just growing new players, or let's make this one about helping players in this bracket. They're having difficulty getting from point A to point B, so let's give them the rewards they need here that will move them over that hump and get them into my committed group, because now they're in level 80, level 85. So we plan ahead of time. Sometimes we don't, but most of the time we plan ahead of time, and then we measure it. If it doesn't hit what we thought it did, but it pulls another lever and does really well, we go, oh, that works that way, and we take that note and we just feed it back into the next thing.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Big fan of the game. About monetization, so how do you ensure that you offer value for money when people actually spend money in your game?
Yeah, boy, that's the magic question, isn't it? So part of my job is to make sure that we don't offer value for money, right? I'm a game designer. I'm supposed to make it really fun. But no, a lot of it is very carefully looking at our targets. What do we have to achieve, right? I mean, at the bare minimum, we have a certain number of people that we have to keep employed. There has to be some overhead over that, right? So we know we have to make X minimum dollars. When we design events, kind of what I was talking about in the last question, we already have kind of established, we're very lucky. We've gone through a lot of trial and error, but we've now kind of established we know what works for what things. So if I know that we're in a place where we need to bump our DAU because maybe it's struggling, there are things that I already know in the game that actually pull that lever and make that work. And a lot of that came from trial and error. So there's really not anything, like Star Wars is such a unique experience. People are religious about Star Wars. They are like, I'm a freaking Jedi. That's just what I am. And you're like, yeah, you're not, but that's okay. You come spend in our game, right? But they love Star Wars, so it's easier for us to have more trial and error because they're more forgiving. Now, they're more vocal. Like I said, I will hear about it on the forums, but they're more forgiving in the sense that I get a little bit more leeway where I can say, like, I think this is going to do this because I have these other things. So, for example, I know that our marquee events, which is how we deliver characters to the players, I know that they're our bread and butter. I know because we did used to deliver them in packs, and it was like they did well, right? We then switched to this marquee thing because we had this conversation, and I was talking to our PM and our producer, and we're like, man, there's these characters, if they're not named, right? If it's not Luke Skywalker, if it's like, Stormtrooper 35, the problem is players go like, yeah, okay, Stormtrooper 35, who cares about that guy? And so we were having trouble getting people to buy those out of the packs, like just independently. So we came up with this idea, and I said, I think actually the problem is people don't know how awesome this character kit is. Like, he does really cool things. You really need him. And so what we said was, hey, let's use the tutorial system, build an event structure here, and say, cool, your first tutorial is just use this ability and wipe out a bunch of people. And then your second tutorial, your second tier of that event is like, use this ability and see it do this cool thing. And that was like, took off for us. So it was really just trying to figure out what we were trying to solve. And I think that at the core of it, every answer is going to be a little different because every game functions a little differently. And not everybody has an IP recognition. But the first thing to do is ask the right question and go like, what is it I need this thing to do? And from there, it's really a brainstorming thing, and then it's experimenting.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Здравствуйте.
Hello. Thank you very much for the conference. My question is about new and older players. So you have community players, you have older players, you have new players, you have new content. So new players join in, but older players just fall off because they don't like this new content. How will you change this content? Will you focus on new players or will you focus on older players more?
Of course, in the course of the game, some old players stop playing and new players join. And my question is, how do you work to benefit from the changes and how to keep the old players in the game?
For the old players, we just keep their credit card and keep charging them. No, please, I'm sorry, no. No, it is about making sure that the content that we have for our older players is there for them, right? So I can look at my older players and I can establish play patterns and behavior that I already know. So I know what they like. And I can build content very specifically for them to keep them engaged. For our new players, it's about accelerating them from level 1 to level 85. As the game gets older, the gap between your new players and your older players gets so wide that you will have this situation where a young player comes in and goes like, I can't do this, I'm gonna delete it. So what we try to do is we try to create events and content that when the younger player comes in, they go, oh man, look at how much stuff I'm getting. Look at these characters, oh man, I could totally do this. So it's about making sure that I can accelerate my younger player through that kind of fear and that insurmountable mountain, and giving my old players stuff where they feel like, yeah, I'm really cool, look at all the stuff I've got. And as long as, because we're a collection game, it's all about making those older players feel like, look at how much I've invested, my collection is so awesome. That's what's the most important. So it's just understanding, you know, what I need to do to keep those players excited so that they'll stay, but then making sure that my new player never feels intimidated.
Thank you.
How do you balance rarity and not leaving money on the table?
Yeah, sure. So, well, theoretically, you're always leaving money on the table, right? Somebody's always going to come and be like, hey, you're leaving money on the table. You just have to accept that sometimes money's going to get left on the table because you don't know everything. The key is when you do realize that something is off, that you're making that adjustment. So with rarity, actually, rarity isn't necessarily the issue here because rarity is just a path, it's just a grind is what it is, right? All it is saying like, cool, you need to just keep investing in this character to make him, you know, to get him to the 7 stars and then he's really cool. What the real issue is power. And that power comes from gear, the gear that you actually put on that character. So what we've done, we actually started having an issue where our power curve was getting like this. So every character we were releasing was just getting more and more powerful. And we knew it. And we couldn't pull a Blizzard and do like a stat squish and just kind of reset everything. And part of that is because we're a mobile game. People are paying very directly for very specific things. And when you do a stat squish, it's not like an MMO where you pay a subscription and you expect things to kind of fluctuate in the world. You cannot mess with a player's investment. That's death. So what we did was we actually released a new tier of gear, and we balanced that gear against where we needed to see everybody, all that character, all the rarity and all that power, where we needed it to be. So we kind of established a new baseline, brought up some of the weaker characters, kind of left some of the more powerful characters alone. We gave them some love. We always give love to these characters, but it's about bringing them into some parity so that it feels like, oh, cool, now I still have room to grow, and when that next character comes out, it feels like it's natural progress. That answer it? All right, cool.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Cool. Awesome.
I guess that's it.
Great. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Oh, wait, one more question? All right, yeah.
Oh,
all right.
great.
All right, I take it back. No thanks. No.
Thank you. How do you think, what are the main features that people came to MMO for them?
I'm not sure I understand your question. What are the main features that people, like what we take from MMOs into mobile?
What are the main features that bring people to MMO?
So honestly, it's the never-ending kind of content, right? Like you think about a game like Witcher 3, right? Have you played Witcher 3 or at least heard of it? Played it? All right. Witcher 3 is a big RPG. You play it, you put 100 hours into it, but then it ends. And all of your investment, all of your time is now done. And it now becomes a memory. And you're like, oh, I love this thing. With an MMO, and especially with a mobile game, I'm constantly releasing new stuff for players to go like, oh, dude, this is cool. I can get this next thing. And it becomes this persistent wealth, right? They're collecting all of this stuff. It's like, this is the scope of my power. Look at how powerful I am. And they keep all that stuff. And it has value because it doesn't end, right? So the more stuff they can collect and the longer they're in the game, the more powerful they become. And the more it's like, yeah, this is my stuff. So everything that we do is about feeding back into that mindset of like, yes, come, get wealthy in this game, play this thing, you feel powerful, make sure that your characters are the best. And as long as we can persist that's exactly, that is the biggest feature that draws people to these types of games. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
So I have some maybe tricky question.
Sure, oh boy.
Just let's say we couldn't eliminate the bad idea and implemented a bad feature or had a bad event and we lost some player base. What can we do about it and to bring those players back or to, heal our reputation?
Sure. So that has actually happened to us. we have released bad features before. And the best thing you can do is number one, be honest with your player base. Hey, it's okay, we screw up, we're human, right? And it's okay to say to a player like, oops, sorry. But we also work to compensate them. Sometimes it's a direct compensation if they've spent something in the game. Sometimes it's a broader compensation where we say like, hey, we're gonna make this easier. We've actually implemented a new feature in our game called double drops, but what it allows us to do, actually it's very useful for us. We don't run it as an event. We run it as a way to accelerate players through the tough areas like what I was talking about earlier. So what I can do is I can target drops and double behavior in specific areas to say like, hey, we goofed over here, so let me make this easier for you. Let me give you something that you'll want to engage with it so that you can see the fixes that we've done. We're also very prompt about fixing things. So we don't mess around. If something goes bad, we are in the office immediately, and we are fixing what we broke. And we are making sure that we're giving the player exactly what they need and saying like, hey, we goofed, we heard your feedback, here's what we're doing to fix it. Now sometimes, a lot of times, you lose a person, you can't get them back. And you just have to accept that. Again, a lot of people will disagree with this statement, but I firmly believe there's a never-ending glut of users. For all eternity, new people are coming of age, they're getting phones, you will always have new people to push into your game as long as you don't burn it to the ground. So sometimes you just have to accept the loss and go like, I screwed up, and just hope you can get somebody new in. But it all starts with saying like, I'm sorry, fixing the problem immediately and making sure you're compensating your player in some way, either through gameplay, or something as rudimentary as like, well, here's 1 million crystals. Like, well, not 1 million, but so. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks to the audience for the question, and thank you, Daniel, for sharing
My pleasure.
your passion.
Yeah, now, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
we're with one of our speakers who just gave his speech here. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Alex Shpilov. I'm head of gaming and esports at wiki.com. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you. So tell us, what's your favorite video game?
Well, at this moment, my favorite game is Destiny 2. I have already spent a lot of hours in it, and it's really awesome.
It is, I gotta tell you. But this is a new game. What about the very first video game you've played? Do you remember it?
The first game was the first Quake. I played it with my dad in my childhood.
That's really great childhood memories, I guess. So tell me, how did you get to the gaming industry?
Well, I was a user of some fan community about Steam and Valve games, and I began to translate some games from some news articles and so on from English to Russian, and Valve invited me to translate their games as a volunteer, and after this I became such a dedicated employee at Valve, and now I'm here.
And what do you think about 4C?
It's my second 4C. I have already visited 4C in Kiev the last year, and it's really cool. I really love it.
Well, I hope you love this one as well, and I hope you get lots of new knowledge and share the knowledge as well. Did you have any questions from the audience that you really liked?
Yeah, the audience was cool. They asked really cool questions, and I hope my speech was really useful for them.
It definitely was. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Hi, we've got one of our speakers again and wanted to ask him some questions. Hi, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Andrei Sarafanov. I'm a senior 3D artist from Wargaming. I'm working on World of Tanks project and creating 3D models of our tanks.
Fantastic. Andrew, tell me, what's the very first game that you've played? Do you remember it?
Actually, I think it was Tetris. Yes, I was amazed by the quality of the assets. I love to play this game all the time. But later, after I saw what computer games can do, I was I've tried to move to the PC gaming, and now I'm working on huge PC titles, and I love it.
Well, that's easy. Tetris had a fantastic destruction engine for its time.
Yeah.
But was it your favorite game, or which one is your favorite game of all time today?
Actually, today I like to play in our game Tanks, and Tetris was more like I had nothing to play, only Tetris. And today Tanks pretty much solves all my wishes, and all I want I can find in this game. It's kind of simple, pretty fast, not very long session, and I have a lot of time to work on my own projects. So that's why I like to play the World of Tanks.
Great. What led you to the gaming industry? How did you come to this industry, to this job?
Yeah, actually, I saw interesting CG Artist Challenge in the internet, and I saw cool character art from different artists all over the world, and I was amazed that young guys can create such amazing art. So I decided to try this out, and I found that it's not that hard, and I can learn that stuff. And I did it as in my spare time, just like a side project from my main job. And I was noticed by Wargaming at some point, and they invited me to join their team, and now I'm doing tanks.
That sounds like a great deal. So glad to have you in the industry. What's your favorite thing about it? Just about the game development?
Yeah, I like the diversity of this industry because it changes a lot and it has a lot of different branches all over the world, different people creating very interesting experience, and every year you need to adapt to the changes and learn new things. And it is very fast-moving industry, and I love it because you need to learn every day.
We definitely all love the industry, but there are maybe some frustrations, something that you don't like that makes you sad in the state of the gaming industry today?
Well, maybe some tools are not developed enough to meet our requirements, so we have to do too much technical work as an artist. But with every year, this issue resolves little by little. So I think it's pretty okay to work these days. So it's not a lot of problems, but a lot of fun.
I agree with you there. It definitely changes quickly. Where do you think the industry will be like in 10 years' time? Do you vision any trends?
As far as I can see, VR industry, it didn't have a good start, but it certainly takes pace. I saw a lot of good examples for artists, like software to paint in virtual reality. It works really well, and I think through the special software, VR will take its place, and at some point, most of game projects will go to VR in the future.
So you think it's going to be the next big thing for everyone, right?
Yes, of course, because it's really immersive experience, and you don't have any boundaries in VR when you use VR headset, and it slowly but surely takes its place, and I think we will be there.
Yeah, the immersion definitely improves with both VR and just the quality of graphics. But do you think the graphics are more important than the storyline, or the gameplay maybe is in the front, or a mixture of some of these?
You need to balance every aspect of your game. As an artist, I know that a lot of details are not that important. The more important the basic structure you want to show to the viewer, and you need to have like basic shapes which will be easy to read, and a narrative is a good example. If you have a good narrative, it can help you to support your characters and all your gameplay mechanics. So I think you need to balance every aspect of your game, and you will achieve success.
Do you have any vision of a game that you'd like to create if you weren't restricted anyhow financially or creatively or professionally, just create anything?
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the genre, but in my spare time I want to create some universes. I'm doing it at the time, and maybe at some point I will make some game project from the assets I've created. So I'm working on it, but I'm not sure what will it be.
Well, whatever it may be, I hope it turns out well for you. But right now we're here in St. Pete. What do you think about the city?
It's my second time in the city, and weather this time is much better. And I love it because the architecture is amazing. Never saw anything like this before. And I love to visit museums. There is an artillery museum here, and I'm, as a tank artist, love to visit such exhibitions. I saw a lot of cool stuff, and we'll visit this city again in the future, for sure.
It's great that you like it, but as far as I understand, 4C is one of the primary goals of your visit. What do you think about the event?
Yeah, event was. I didn't expect that so much speakers will come in one place, and I'm amazed by the quality of the organization structure so far. So far I love it. It's a very cool conference.
Do you have a favorite question that you were asked before the start of the conference yet?
Favorite question? No, I don't have.
What would you ask yourself then? If you were interviewing yourself, what would you like to open up with? What would you ask yourself?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard question for me.
It's fine, but it's kind of a retrospective thing. And any presentation that you're particularly looking forward to? Which one would you like to hear?
I've met a couple interesting people here, and I will attend their presentation for sure. But there are many of them, so I will not pick any one of them.
Well, I hope you get a favorite sometime along the line, and I hope you like the event overall. Thank you very much for your participation.